Your source for everything paranormal. Para X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Long they hold together in ancient song, waiting for the spring to set them free by oak and ash and rowan tree. And they dance all night till the sun does rise and spread its beams across the skies. Then they'll speak their secrets wise in the arms of the great stone circle. And if you go around with a shin, there's fairy folk who live within. It's 9 times round you must dance and spin in the arms of the great stone circle. Light, light, a fire in the night, jump through the flames, see the flames burn bright. See the world through open sight in the arms of the great stone circle. She is round and look for you, then abound. What you seek for shall be found in the arms of the great stone circle. Come with me at Halloween and follow the march of the fairy queen. On everything hill she shall be seen in the arms of the great stone circle. And if you go around with a shin, there's fairy folk who live within. It's 9 times round you must dance and spin in the arms of the great stone circle. Light, light, a fire in the night, jump through the flames, cause the flames burn bright. See the world through open sight in the arms of the great stone circle. Song, waiting for the spring to set them free by oak and ash and rowan tree. And they dance all night till the sun does rise and spread its beams across the skies. Then they'll speak their secrets wise in the arms of the great stone circle. And if you go around with a shin, there's fairy folk who live within. It's 9 times round you must dance and spin in the arms of the great stone circle. Light, light, a fire in the night, jump through the flames, see the flames burn bright. See the world through elfin sight in the arms of the great stone circle. Light, light, a fire in the night, jump through the flames as the flames burn bright. See the world through elfin sight in the arms of the great stone circle. Light, light, a fire in the night, jump through the flames as the flames burn bright. See the world through elfin sight in the arms of the great stone circle.
Merry meet and blessed be, heed the words I call to thee. Honour the old ones in name and deed, hearken not to others' greed. Pray to the moon when she is round, luck with you shall then abound. Respect the earth, the sky, the sea, as you will it, so mote it be. Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para X Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Merry meet everybody, and welcome to the show. The opening music tonight was Fairy Dance by Spiral Dance, and that's because yesterday was the spring equinox and Ostara, and so spring has sprung and the fairies are dancing. Now my guest tonight is Daniel Mack, and some of you might remember when he was here a few weeks ago talking about the book The Mirror of Magic by Kurt Seligman, but he's got a lot of other things going on as well. He's a teacher, a writer, an artist who works with the powers of natural materials to make furniture and sacred objects. And he's been working on a book-like project for 20 years called the Casual Alchemist. And that's about letting the process of making things be a portal to the creative unconscious. That includes a whole lot of things, including tonight's topic, creative aging. But don't for a minute think that this is a show for people later in life. No matter what age you are, like it or not, you are aging. So why not learn how to do it creatively, right? And so let's get to it. Daniel, welcome back.
Oh, nice to be here.
Good. See, you've aged a little bit since we last spoke. We all have. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But this is going to be a very interesting show because, as I just mentioned, creative aging isn't just for geezers, old folks. And you've put together a very well-received 1-hour presentation that you go out and share with the masses. And you talk about fresh, creative, and spiritual opportunities for anyone that's going through a life transition. And that's pretty much a constant with us all, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So the creative aging is just a way to package this idea of attending to your own spiritual growth.
Sounds simple, but and it probably is. But there's things to do that we probably don't think about. But first of all, my curiosity is, how did you get interested in this topic to begin with?
I've been looking for various platforms ever since I've been teaching work about natural materials and working with natural materials for many, many years. And I've been looking for ways to write about it. And it's been extremely difficult because it's so in the moment. So a book is so static. It's so, you do it a year ahead of time. It comes out. You have to talk about what got written then. So I was not able to create, I'm still not able to create something that is dynamic, that is put together in the moment, much like this program is right now. Mm-hmm. So that had me stalled. And I realized that there was this great group of people out there who were seekers and searchers, the great number of us who are retiring, who have access to going places at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was sort of a relabeling or representing of this idea of casual alchemy for a very specific group of people who, have kind of clunked into this idea of retirement and having to kind of reposition themselves in their life.
Plunked is a good word. I've heard several people who have retired. It's first like, oh my God, it's shock, and then it's, what can I do with myself? Am I just going to take up space? And then things start happening, but it's hard to get used to. So plunk is great adjective. Thank you.
Yeah. It leads to sometimes, and what I'm running into is leads to something called toxic aging for some people, that they're in such free fall at that point that they don't quite know what to do. So they've been usually expelled from a previous life where they had standing, where they had space, where they had lots of different kind of markers in their life. And all of a sudden, they just don't know what to do. So, they often become their own worst enemies and sort of making jokes about themselves. I don't do anything anymore. I'm retired. Don't ask me to do a thing. And they sort of keep themselves in kind of a toxic situation. Mm-hmm. And they can recognize it too, because it ends up in depression is what it is. It's a functioning form of depression. Mm-hmm. So when I talk to people, I get rooms, 30 and 40 and 50 people will come and just sort of shop me and hear what I have to say.
Mm-hmm. And you have a lot to say. And I popped over to your website, and on the homepage it says, Finding Magic in the Ordinary. And I wish more people would think like that, because in my world, magic is always present. It's under our very noses, but some people just don't know where to look. And it is not extraordinary. It is actually very ordinary, right?
Right. Very much so. I was out with a bunch of kids a few weeks ago. Kids are really important in this process. They're the pre-institutional form of the older people. We're post-institutional. They're pre-institutional. So they have access to kind of magic and the kind of the appreciation of the unseen in a way that we still have to relearn. And all I did was bring a tarp out, and we just blew ourselves around on a windy day on a hill. So getting in touch with the unseen forces of the moment is a great way to do that. Wind, temperature, things that just sort of your body tells you all about them. Isn't it windy today? Isn't it cold today? Isn't it hot today? Mm-hmm. And that's a real royal road to magic.
It is. I mean, kids, little ones, haven't been taught that there's no such thing. As we grow older, there are people who try to put the kibosh on that. And that's where we lose it. And so after a fashion, after we go through the hardships of life and being an adult and all that, there's some point where we need to get back in touch with that inner child and remember what it was like not to have the walls and people pointing a finger and you can't think that way and you can't think that way. You get to a certain age and this is one of the good things about aging is that finally you don't care what other people say. You want to think the way you want to think and it doesn't matter.
Right. The consequences are negligible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's really important and to go out, like you said, on a windy day with the tarp and just be yourself. I mean, there's no expectations. There's nothing that you have to prove or disprove. You're just letting your body take over, your mind take over, rather than rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I think rules are kind of toxic at certain points about certain things.
Yeah.
And especially about how you live your life and how you are going to manage an old age, so to speak. I mean, you can't really define old age because, physically you can, but mentally, none of us over 50 think that we're any more than 25 or 30. It's just the way it is.
It's the dirty secret.
It is. And then, you look in the mirror and you think, oh, hell, that's not right.
They're right, yeah.
But, the whole point of it is getting back to your true self. And it doesn't matter what age. There are people that are 40 years old that are old people. They're befuddled and they're grumpy and they're whatever. And then there's people that are 90 years old that are spry as all get out and happy and carefree.
Yeah.
So, it's a learning process. And, and for you talk about creativity isn't about art, but about finding ways to keep making our lives meaningful. And I kind of personally believe that this is something that we need to find within ourselves first and foremost, rather than depending on others to make us feel as though we are living meaningful lives. And I think I'm kind of thinking along the right lines, right?
You certainly are. No, I was looking forward to this because last time we talked, you and I found a lot of common ground. And so I was looking forward to sort of exploring that more with you now. Yeah,
cool. What do you think keeps people from doing that? Is it that they don't trust themselves? They don't believe in themselves enough to trust to just go with the flow and be yourself, or has somebody told them that being themselves is not good enough? How does this work, do you think?
Well, I think to make a living, you have to be very acquiescent to the situations around you, and you learn certain ways to behave. And if you become too self-proclamative or if you experiment too much, you pay some consequences. But the consequences become less and less as you get older. So there's always that flicker in there. It's never extinguished. There's always the capacity for someone to kind of rediscover, and it's just figuring out what opportunity to give yourself. And there's so many different ones, so often we're tied to words and ideas and logic. But there's so many others. The idea of just making something, just going into nature. I can get to some very specific things either now or a bit later.
Yeah, no, go for it.
But it's paying attention. It's shopping around. You're the buyer, so shop around for the portal into this what I call the creative unconscious. It's always there waiting. And the iceberg is a great metaphor for this, that we sort of live where you can see it just above the water, but 2/3 of it, 3/4 of it's below the water. Mm-hmm. And that's really what the unconscious is all about too. And I'm kind of a lay Jungian in all this. I followed Carl Jung's work quite carefully, and one of his students, particularly James Hillman. But so the idea of how we relate to the unconscious or our own personal iceberg is key in this, and it's finding the right time and place to experiment with yourself, to take a small risk. You don't have to do large things. You don't have to be a world adventurer, but it's small everyday risks, like you were mentioning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just getting back to who you were, that's so important. But then, okay, that brings up another point. Some people never do know who they are, really. because from a very early age they're told who they are. And I've heard a lot of people being so unsure of themselves because they don't know what to think. They don't know how to think for themselves, and that's tragic. It really is.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. And what you can do, especially when you're older and you have access to more history, right? You can look back further. You can begin to see, you can squint, or just in full sun, you can just see certain patterns, certain repeating themes in your life. Oh, that person again, or this kind of person again, or I always, so that you look at yourself as if you're just kind of a repeated series on Netflix, and you enjoy it. So you get the chance after 50, 60, 70 to sort of review in a certain way. And this stuff's been done forever. I mean, I'm sure you've talked about grimoires on this program, right? Mm-hmm. Essentially, that's what you're doing. You're doing a personal story about what spells, what activities, what contact with magic worked for you, and it'll surprise you if you've not done it before. You realize how easy it is to begin to see people reappearing in your life and in different ways. So it's not a very difficult thing to do. It usually takes just a little bit of time, and you have to put up with a little bit of impatience because it's not a useful activity. It doesn't result in anything terribly tangible.
It's cathartic, though, and that's good. At least, yeah, that's a start.
Yeah.
Okay, so and you also talk about creativity is a human resource that we all have. But many people will claim, and I know you've heard this 1,000 times, that they don't have a creative bone in their bodies. So how do you respond to that?
Right. Well, it's the problem of the wording that everybody makes something. So you just take the word creativity out of the whole thing, which is a supercharged word. And the same way with art, and you have a need to make. You make things. Well, I don't really make things. Well, you make your dinner. You make your bed. You might make trouble. So it's figuring out ways to looking for the crack in that conversation with someone where they all of a sudden let their guard down and they said, you're right. That you're not attacking them. You're not threatening them, saying. You're just inviting them to take a slightly different position on looking at their own life. And it can be done very privately. So I talk about ways to do it privately, which it's almost meditative, and then ways you can even get in, just start publicly. So you can start anywhere in this process. It does not have to be, you don't have to go to mindful classes. You don't have to go to on a retreat. You can just start by going through a dresser drawer and say, why the hell did I keep that? And then you begin to see because objects carry meaning for us. We don't keep them randomly. We all build altars out of our objects. They're in our dresser drawers. They're in our medicine cabinets. And you can begin to see little stories made from all these objects. So it's just having the time and that slight shift of lens to begin to look at the world you have created around yourself. So in that sense, you're creative. You couldn't live without exercising creativity.
Well, even creativity maybe is when you're walking down the street and you see, like a crack in the sidewalk or something that you walk around. Well, that's being creative. You're creatively maneuvering yourself so you don't trip, right?
Right.
So it's kind of, it's a difficult word and it's an easy word at the same time. But you're right. Everybody has creativity and you got to use it. And, so we all have within us, and practicing creativity eases the difficulty of many tidal transitions, as you say, from being human from birth through growing up, through aging, and the bumps in the road that go along with it. And there are lots of bumps. So will practicing creative aging perhaps assist us in skimming over the bumps and not falling into many potholes?
Maybe, likely not. I think that's part, that kind of friction is part of being alive, and you're not really going to get away from it, it's probably going to more affect your reaction to it. It may not affect the pain of it, but it's going to affect your reaction to it or the grace with which you accept it, saying, oh, this again. So instead of seeing yourself as a victim of this, you just see it as part of the larger weaving that you're a part of.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but it's, I think for a lot of people too, it will make them feel more confident, I think. Once you realize that you have some power, that you are creative, you're a little bit more empowered to kind of get over that negativity that maybe is hanging around your neck. You can look back maybe and see some of the bonehead things we've done when we were younger and make sure we don't, keep following that type of a pattern. So I think there's a really a great deal of goodness in all of this, of digging around and practicing that creativity. And in some ways, I think it might help some of the difficulties anyway. Certainly not all of them, as you're right, because, life's a crapshoot. And maybe you didn't stub your toe yesterday, you might stub it tomorrow. But, yeah, it will happen. So,
Listen,
I think
you were reminding me, there's this, I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time, this is right on this topic, a great poem by Portia Nelson. Have you heard this poem called Autobiography in 5 Chapters?
No.
Oh, good. As you were talking, I got up, went to I found it. The poet is Portia Nelson. It's called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes me a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see that it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street.
Mm-hmm. Good. I like that.
So you can learn, but you have to go through the friction, the pain, the loss, and then learning does not come without a price.
No, it doesn't. It hurts. But, all right, wisdom comes from that, and you can't put a price on wisdom. You can sometimes put a price on stupidity, but sometimes wisdom, no. You can't. It's priceless. So, yeah, but no, that's a great poem because it's the patterns that we need to break. It's the learning and being creative about making the right choices. Now, you also say that creativity is the oil of the 21st century, the natural, innate, learned, and practiced capacity to envision several alternative versions of the future. So, again, there you're saying that we basically have choices, right? Yeah.
And it's just putting ourselves in the right position where we can exercise them. And often that means you take responsibility. That's what the beautiful ending of the last 2 chapters of that poem are about. Mm-hmm. That once you begin to take responsibility for your own life, you begin to find things become a little bit richer.
Mm-hmm. And you can't, and don't buy into things. I mean, we're brought up to think that, when people get, all right, let's go back to when we were 20. People that were 30 were ancient. Yeah. And we didn't want to be 30. We didn't want to be an adult. 40, you think about it and it's okay. It kind of hurts. To me, any birthday with 0 on the end is a little bit painful. But as we keep going, we keep learning. And it's really kind of a great way to change your thought processes. I mean, somebody in the chat room said that a minute ago. It's, changing your way of thinking. But we can't, in Soylent Green, somebody brought that up in the chat room. What, people were 30 and they died? Or they were killed? Right. I don't remember, so nobody wanted to be 30 because you died. Well, that's a metaphor. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought it was pretty funny because I was way younger than that. But it's taking away the expectations that you've been kind of chewing on and hearing about, and people, because you're always going to hear somebody that, like a grandparent, say, "Oh, don't get old." Right? That's the first thing you're going to hear. Don't get old. And that, you could be 5 years old and hear that, and then it scares the bejesus out of you.
Yeah.
Or, there'll be somebody that'll walk around, "Oh my God, I've got aches and pains and my stomach doesn't act the way it used to. And, I don't hear well. I don't see well." We're bombarded with that. And so then we're like a sponge. We soak up all that negative stuff. And some of it is true. I mean, in aging and as you get older, okay, things happen. But they don't have to happen the way you've heard them. And you don't have to sit there and expect them to happen because, you know what, they may not.
Mm-hmm. Also, as you do get older, your capacity, your appetite for spirituality changes. Mm-hmm. You just have... you're just at a different place in the arc. That's why coming up with various metaphors for looking at life helps. One doesn't just, my iceberg is not going to hold it forever. I love the kaleidoscope. You have the same pieces and they just keep getting reorganized in a very orderly, beautiful way, but they're never quite the same twice.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good thought. I mean, I love kaleidoscopes, but same things rehash, but not in the same way. I mean, you can make them all different.
So you can either regret that you don't have the old way that you really loved, or you can just go with it, saying maybe I'll get it back again or something. So it's small adjustments to kind of taking just experiments with attitude. You don't have to let go of a long-held sacred attitude, but you can experiment, and that's what kind of aging or any kind of, if you're in enough pain, in any transition, you'll have that capacity. Well, it isn't working the way it is now, so maybe I'll just imagine it a little bit different. So taking small risks, putting yourself in slightly uncomfortable situations will often open up something very unexpected and much larger.
Mm-hmm. And, it doesn't all have to be all this down, bad, negative, black cloud stuff. I mean, we can take a deep breath and blow some of that away. Just because somebody has it doesn't mean that you're going to be in the same situation. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned a few very specific symptoms of this transition that we go through. So what should we be looking out for? What kind of things should we be looking out for?
In aging or just transition? Mm-hmm. I mean, transitions. We're all experts at this.
Yeah. Let's do transition. Start with that.
Well, shock. Why me? How did this happen? I mean, again, that poem, she sort of articulates several of them. Why did this happen to me? Right. Surprise, this has never happened to me before. You're losing a certain kind of standing. You're losing you don't feel perhaps as visible as you did before. Mm-hmm. And that may be a function of ego or not. You may develop a kind of aversion to being in public that you never had before. I used to be so outgoing. What happened? When you just like spending. So there's lots of different changes that you can almost keep a tick list of. I was never like this before. I think I went to a doctor when I was 20. And I said, "Oh, doctor, my foot's never felt like this before." And he said, "Daniel, I have people in their 80s coming to me and saying the same thing." So that idea of that you're always changing and you're always adjusting, but some adjustments seem more dramatic than others. But you can recognize when you're in a certain level of distress, and it motivates you to make some other changes. And that's where you can just see yourself as kind of an ongoing experiment, that you take some small risk, that you might learn something new, you might explore your feral side a little bit more. And feral would would encompass going out into nature and perhaps going off the trail and not being on the trail as much, or just, again, pushing yourself just beyond where you think your comfort level is, just to see what will happen. And again, you're not taking undue risk, but you're stretching yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's a key thing. There's something called the streetlight effect. I don't know if you've heard this, where people look for their lost keys beneath the streetlight because that's where the best light is. So if you've got to go out into the darkness a little bit to find something, you can't always find it in the safest of places. So it depends, and you may call on the spirit of someone else in your family who was an adventurer in some way. Oh, I remember Uncle so and so or Aunt so and so. She just went to California. So that you can, in one sense, time is not linear. It's all at once, and you can access some of the energy of other people that you knew, friends, family, whatever. That you don't have to buy into the linearity of history that we've been taught.
Yeah, that's very true. And the thing about transition and aging both have in common is that it's an unknown. And when we mention the word unknown, people start to freak out. They get scared because they think it's bad. But the unknown can be just as good as it can be bad. So I guess it's kind of mindset and the way of thinking. And we just have to kind of work on that. And that's what we're going to keep talking about. But right now we're going to take a quick break. So everybody stay put. Put your dancing shoes on. Kick up your heels for a couple minutes. We'll be back.
Don't go away. There's more Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks right after these important messages.
Red, where are you going?
I'm going back to the paranormal view, back where I belong.
Please, take me with you.
No, I'm through with everything here. I want to see if there's something left in life I haven't explored. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Red, don't run to them. They talk about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs, and all kind of supernatural scary stuff.
You'll never understand, will you, Scarlet?
No.
Well, that's your misfortune.
Red, if you go, where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear... Mine.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
That's the Paranormal View with your host, Henry Foister, Jeffrey Gould, and Barbara Duncan. Every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Para X Radio Network.
Missed an episode of Stirring the Cauldron? Then be sure to check out marlabrooks.com and check out the archive. And while you're there, check out Marla's weekly Witches Oracle card reading. Explore the site to find many great resources, such as information on tarot, oracle readings, metaphysical consultations, and links to all of Marla's books. That's marlabrooks.com. Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Well, I hope nobody threw out their back, kicking up their heels and dancing during the break. But we're back here with Daniel Mack, and we're talking about creative alchemy and change and all kinds of good stuff. And we were talking about, right before we broke, about specific symptoms of transition. And one of the terms that I saw in some of the stuff that you gave me was talking about a portal shift. Do you want to explain what a portal shift is?
Yes, it's just portals are just ways that we move from one place to another. They're just doorways. They're thresholds. Or now we can get into. I love being on this kind of program because you can talk about liminal activity, whereas other people scratch their head. So limins are doorways, and we're constantly going through these. Some are more dramatic than others. But sometimes the doorways don't work. The portals don't work. They have always done it this way. And so that you have to be alert to when one is closing up and another one that you don't quite expect might be opening. And again, there's ways to do that. You just be more in touch with your body. There's just so many. You deal more with children. I think there's 10 or 12 that I talk about. Distrust discourse. That's my favorite because I'm so word oriented. That the idea that words are something to be just taken with a grain of salt or to be distrusted is almost a poison to me. But it's so important because words create a kind of linearity and logic, and that prevents us going through the magic portal then. Magic is really letting go of a lot of that. And then the key thing, my whole experience has been in making things. And that's a nonverbal activity, so that you just do something. And people already do this. When they're feeling low, when they're feeling kind of foggy, they'll make themselves a sandwich or dinner and any level of making. You're not talking about egoic making in terms of the Sistine Chapel or something. You're just talking about using your body and your sense of composition and intuition and in another way, in a daily way. And it was the theologian Karl Rahner talked about everyday mysticism, and that's really what we're talking about here. And in what way can you stay in touch with the spiritual as those portals to the spiritual kind of shift and change a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was just looking outside. I got distracted for 2 seconds because we've had this storm and the clouds were really dark and kind of gloomy, but kind of pretty. And I was just looking out the window and there was this bright spot amongst all the dark clouds and everything. It was breathtaking. And it came and it went just like a heartbeat, but it was like, all of a sudden you go from dark to light, and that's kind of what we're talking about too, in a way. So that was kind of had me shaking my head for a minute, the universe.
That's right. It's paying attention to those, the dead flies on the windowsill.
There you go.
Did you ever see, there's something that went around on YouTube, dead fly art. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Oh, good. You got to look it up. Okay. It's someone just sort of collected the dead flies from the windowsills and just drew little pictures around them. And it's just wonderful. So it's that idea of just finding, and humor is a huge way into the sacred. Both the clowns, sacred clowns. And so humor is another great way to sort of find the portal out of one of your places into another one of your places.
And we can shift that portal. It's in our capability of making the shift happen.
That's right.
Unless we move, nothing will. Mm-hmm. All right. So aging in general, also it's as we talked about, a time of transition and challenge. And you said that the third and fourth quadrant of our lives are unlike all the others. Now, some of it I can get, but let's talk about in some of the ways that it's unlike, aside from the aches and pains and, that kind of thing.
The aches and pains probably translate into a change in energy, that you're not as agile, as kind of active as you had been, and you might regret that. You may define being human as being very active, so that if you had to come up with a descriptive list of what my life is like now, you might not like it, but you can come up with that. So that's what I mean. It has different characteristics. You also have history at this point in the third age or the fourth quadrant of life that you don't have. And that history has a power. So you can look back on things. You can see patterns. It's like being up on you've gotten to the top of a hike, and you're on the cliff. You can see things that you could not see when you were still coming up, and that has an amazing value. Mm-hmm. The idea, and that also you've probably done what you're going to do. You've probably climbed where you're going to be, and you can share things at this point. So the idea of being generous is maybe a whole new idea for you at this point. So I think capitalism might sort of fade as a favored activity as you get into your third age or this fourth quadrant. Because you may likely have solved some of those problems one way or the other, or you've just become less needy or expectant of a certain standard of living. And that kind of detaching from the capitalist mentality will give you another whole set of kind of options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about composing our present and future, because again, we do have the ability to shapeshift ourselves and our lives, and therein lies the alchemy. How's that for clever? Yeah, clever words. But not everybody, again, has the confidence to believe in themselves. So let me get to the big question that you mentioned in some of your things. What are some of the ways that we can become regenerative for ourselves, our families, and our community?
One, you should be motivated to it. You know, I was at a rest stop. I was driving to Maryland the other day. I was at a rest stop, and there was a guy who had a truckload of motorcycles. And he was clearly going from place to place, racing his motorcycles. I don't think he has a great interest in exploring some of these questions, so that you have to be motivated to sort of be looking into both in yourself and to wanting to rebalance the spiritual, the intuitive, and the technical, which is what alchemy is about. And unless you're motivated, you're probably not even listening to this program. So let's
there you go.
So specifics. You first, a kindness to yourself. That, you know, often people carry around that little kind of Chinese cookie message. You know, you're not enough. You know, don't tell anybody, but, you know, you've never been enough. So instead, think that you're enough and just find where you want to start. Do you want to start body-wise? Do you want to do something? You want to make something? Give someone a gift. I mean, there's so many different places to start like this. So that first you have to see yourself as a person who has access to things. You have access to information. You have access to empathy. You have access to objects, to time. So you may just want to share time with somebody. You just want to visit with somebody. Personally, I like the idea of making things. So the idea of making something and giving it to somebody is a big deal, because that it's both a pleasurable thing for me in the making, and then you've fallen off the edge of the earth. You have no idea how they're going to react to it. So again, we all collect these things. They're in our pockets. They're in our glove compartments, in our cars. They're everywhere. So if you just take, if you take just three things, take a stick and a string or a piece of wire and put something on it. So essentially you're creating wands, Marla, and you're giving wands to other people. You're not calling them wands. You can call wands on this program, but don't tell anybody else. But so you're creating objects of enchantment, tools of enchantment is what you're doing. They can look like take an old screwdriver, and what else can you put on the tip of it or the handle of it? So it's those small they're not grand. You're not going to have a show in a local gallery of your screwdriver wands. So you get rid of that level of kind of expectation of the art capitalist world. You know, oh my God, you could sell this stuff. This is beautiful. People will buy this. You know, so the idea of staying in the gifting economy is a really important thing. Just sharing something. This winter, you know, my neighbors would shovel parts of my sidewalk for me. Just small acts of kindness that are unexpected, that were totally in their power. They didn't have to. I didn't ask them. I'm not infirmed, but they just did it. And I did similar things, you know, or spend time with children in some way or another. Probably not in a school setting. I've been working in the schools, and the schools are just so institutional, and they have their ways that you really can't get to what I like about children. So I'm finding other you know, I'm setting up a nature play area over in one of my community centers, and that's nice. It's where people have. So you're looking for those cracks in society where you can just sort of seep in and see what happens in there. So making objects, giving them to people. understanding that this time of life it's the earth element, that earth is the sign, is the element of old age. And just sit with all that. What does that mean that it's autumn and winter? What are your associations with autumn and winter? Read some poems about autumn and winter. The poet Donald Hall is just remarkable in this. Robert Frost. It's not very difficult. So poetry is another example of kind of magical writing that you can make yourself put yourself in the presence of. What else?
Well, you talked about doing a grimoire, for one thing. That's important. You could, and when you're making things, you talk about certain exercises like making tools, like wands, like you said, or talisman, learning about ancestral karma.
Yeah, that's a big one. The
hardest one that I think, though, is creating a thumbnail of yourself in just 50 words or less. Because I don't know if I could do that. Either I would have 3 words, you're SOL, out of luck, or, it would be too. I couldn't put it into a shortened version. That's a hard one. I think everybody should do that. Everybody that's listening to the show, well, I don't care how old you are. I think you need to write up a thumbnail of yourself in just 50 words or less, because, and don't think too hard about it. Let it just come out of your brain and on paper, because you might learn something that you didn't realize before.
Oh, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see what parts of your brain seem to value something. Who are you talking to when you write these words? Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. Having been kind of associated with the art world for years, I've always had to do little... I've practiced doing this kind of thing. So it's figuring out what are your favorite verbs and nouns when you describe yourself. But mm-hmm. it's a very interesting process. The other is haiku. It just is a very powerful, again, economical activity where you're talking about mood, the weather that day, and some kind of contrast or comparison. So you have some guidelines. You're just not being thrown into, be creative. You're being given some guidelines so that writing a piece of haiku is a good exercise. And visually, I can do that with people. I give them an empty jar, and I said, just go out. Their tails are wagging. They're in a workshop. What are we going to do? I said, here's an empty jar. Or I'll have gone to Burger King and gotten some of those little ketchup, those paper ketchup things. Mm-hmm. I said, what, can you go out and find something to put in there? And they look at me as if I'm crazy. And all of a sudden, 10 people come back with 10 very different ways of filling that Burger King ketchup cup. Or that, my favorite right now is, you might get this sponsor, is the Wee yogurt jar. The only yogurt that comes in a glass jar these days. Yeah. It's a beautiful jar. So I'll use that one, and I'll use the Burger King. And so people don't feel threatened. They're not having to do a huge 4x4 canvas or some kind of assemblage project, all these kind of fancy words. Just find something and put it in that jar. And then you begin to there's a dialogue that begins to happen. There's a little frequency that begins to get set up between you and your hunting, your gathering, your collecting, and your honoring of some object. So you're letting a piece of maybe the natural world or the unnatural world, they're all around us, speak to you. You're in relationship at that point.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the yogurt jar, because that got my mind thinking, because it is a very sweet little jar. And I can't believe that people buy the yogurt and throw that out. And so I would look at it and I'd bring it home and I would wash it out.
There's yogurt in there?
Yeah, at one point. Yeah.
Oh, well, I just get the jar and throw the yogurt out. Oh, my God, I didn't realize.
There's the creativity there. But, I'm sitting there trying to think of ways that I can use it. Not being hoarding or anything, not taking up too much space, but just it's a shame not to use it at some point. So there you've got creativity going right there. There's a little alchemy in your brain.
Yep.
So, I mean, it can be so simplistic that you don't even realize. I mean, all right, go down the street and pick a flower, or pick up a leaf or something, which, doesn't cost anything, and figure out something to do with it. Do you want to put it on a shelf? Do you want to put it in a box? Do you want to paint on it? Do you want to, just anything to keep the creativity flowing. And creativity, there's no right or wrong. I mean, it's who you are and what you do and how you feel. And that's it. There's no rules. We're throwing about the rules that we've been learning all our lives and staying in that box and happily putting a toe out and realizing that the shark didn't bite your foot off and, go out and have more fun.
Also, the artist trading card form, they're little 2.5 by 3.5 inch. They can be out of anything, and it's a piece of paper, shirt cardboard, or a corner. So it's small. Imagine just 2.5 by 3.5 inches. So again, it's so manageable that you're not going to be tempted to try to create. You're not going to be paralyzed by the artistic potential of it all, but you use it kind of almost like psychic flypaper. What's going on today. You can put your thumbprint on it. Often I'll have a box of Band-Aids there, and I'll say, let's just put one Band-Aid on this, and then people will get it right away. What wounds are they dealing with? What are they going to put under the Band-Aid? So that if you come in kind of on low altitude with a lot of these things, creativity just sort of sparks so easily.
Mm-hmm. It does, and I want to talk just briefly because this is like flying time. I mean, this is amazingly fast this week, even faster than usual. But I want to talk about your weekly meetings on making things as meditation, where you explore how the act of making has meditative benefits, and you bring sample materials to each meeting, and that encourages activities at home. And I really like the sound of that, and people in your area certainly can go and be part of it. But also on your website, there is information about that. So let's kind of just give a couple of minutes to that, because this is kind of like the stepping off point for people who don't know where to start.
Yeah, I've been trying that. I've been trying in a local yoga center to behave like a drop-in yoga teacher, and it's not worked so far. Mm-hmm. So it isn't quite what people are expecting. So I haven't somehow broken through that veil of comfort. Mm-hmm. So I'm still working on that.
Okay.
So the website, I think the website is very rich with a lot of these things. So that yes. I think I'm just going to almost put everything. In fact, probably this book that I'm doing will just end up on my website. I think going through publishers one more time in that process is probably part of a different era of my life, and I think I'd just as soon give the information away at this point.
Well, it's a gift to do that, and there's just so many things that we don't think about. And I was going to say earlier that some people don't understand creativity, they don't understand alchemy and all that. But I think we in the metaphysical community are blessed because we don't need to be taught some of these things that, I don't know, lay people, is that the right word? Yeah. That we understand so much more, and it takes so much less thought to be this way and to do this way. And I think we see things in a different light.
Yeah.
And this is what we're trying to make other people think about too. And this is what this whole thing is about. Maybe some of the stuff that we've been talking about tonight will rattle a few cages or a few gray matters or some brain cells, and realize that we have the capability to make really good changes. And one door closes, like you were talking about retirement, but another door is there, always opens. It always is. Yeah. You just have to walk through it. So it's not all doom and gloom and scary and you're getting lost, and none of that. This is something that if you're 30, if you're 40, if you're 50, you're aging, like I said, you're aging every day. And these are the things that you need to start doing then, because it's going to enrich your world in general. Age has no jurisdiction here at all. It's about getting to know yourself and making your life a happier one and a more productive one in your own way, not because you're going to work 9 to 5, right?
Right, exactly. Here, one other fast way. I have loved Pinterest, setting up Pinterest boards. The algorithms in there and the images that just sort of collide with each other are just, it's a delight to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so people need to actually go to your website, and you can give that out. And then also I think there's a link to the Pinterest thing there, because you've put a great deal of effort and really good information out there. So people should need to know where to get a hold of it.
Good.
So what is your website?
Oh, it's my name, DanielMack.com.
See, now that was creative. That was it. Yeah, it snapped just like that. Yeah.
Straightforward.
I do it too, because, it makes it so much easier. I would love to have something really creative and whatever. And then, it's like passwords on websites. You want to have your password that's really, really creative. So you'll write something that you think is brilliant, and then every damn time you have to write it in, it's so long and so drawn out that it's just a real pain. So yeah, simplicity is a good thing. It really is. So, all right, we're trying to beat the clock here, but people can get a hold of you and find out so much more. And there's your furniture to talk about. There's all kinds of things, and your little talisman that I adore. Yeah. People go to his website and look at these little talisman, because he'll explain what they are. They're lovely little things, and that is creativity right there. Yeah. So, Daniel, you got to come back, because we just talk too much and it goes too fast.
I know. I enjoyed the last time, and I definitely enjoyed this time. So we'll find something else to talk about. Absolutely. And so this was a really wonderfully informative show. And I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. And I also appreciate everybody that's listening in. And really happy that you're here. And until next time, everybody, we're going to take off. So blessed be, and merry meet again. Good night.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2019. The Mysterioso March by Kevin MacLeod is licensed through Incompetech.com.